Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. The way in which I open up any lecture is it's necessary that I give reverence to my Ibn, because without paying reverence to them, there would be no me. I am because we are. So when we understand the continuum of our existence, past, present, and future, they all coincide. All right. So time as we know it really doesn't exist. This is just a compartmentalized way that we create dates and events. All right. So when we talk about the physical plane and we talk about the spiritual plane, they're all connected. All right. They're all connected. So I'm going to start with a couple of spirituals that we're all familiar with, and some hymns that we're all familiar with. And the reason for that being, we'll get into that after, but we'll just start. If you know the words, you can follow along, or if you don't know the words, you can just, you can improvise. All right? Somebody prayed for me, had me on their mind. I'm so glad they prayed for me. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed for me. My mama prayed for me. She had me on her mind. I'm so glad she prayed for me. I'm so glad she prayed. I'm so glad she prayed. I'm so glad she prayed for me. My father prayed for me, had me on his mind. I'm so glad he prayed for me. I'm so glad he prayed. I'm so glad he prayed. I'm so glad he prayed for me. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. The reason why it's important for us to actually do reverence like that is because these are the things that our ancestors, they participated in. All right, these are the things that got them through their struggle, that got them through their obstacles. These are the things that it created, a fiber between them that was universal. These spirituals, because in these spirituals there are also deeper meanings. So it's an esoteric message, even in the spirituals. Okay, and a lot of times we had to speak in code. A lot of times we couldn't be outright and forthright in what we practice. And we could not talk about the things that we engaged in. So we use music, we use sound, we use vibration, and we use esoteric information in order to communicate. So no matter where I was shipped off to, no matter where my family was divided, no matter where I went, we all communicated, okay? We all communicated, and we were able to combine our experiences with music, vibration, sound, and these spirituals, okay? The reason why I ended off with Al-Fatiha is because that is, I would say, one of my greater foundations. When you move from school to school, you find a commonality, and you find that all the information that you learn in these different schools, all of them have a commonality, and there's a universality about them, okay? So you might have grown up in a church. You might have grown up in a mosque. You might have grown up in a temple, or whatever you have had experiences in as far as practicing. This creates a foundation to where you'll go. All right. I can't say that if I did not become Muslim, if I didn't learn about the religion of Islam, I would be where I am right now. It created a portal hole for me. It created another dimension for me to step through so that I can understand some things when I came in contact with them in this experience or this journey that we call life. All right? We all have different experiences because all of our journeys are different. So my journey is not going to be the same as your journey, and your journey is not going to be the same as my journey. All right? But what we can agree on is that we all have a final destination. We all have a final destination. So on this altar, you see some of my egun, or my relatives. Starting with my Aunt Brenda. And this is my grandfather on my father's side. And this is my grandfather and my grandmother on my mother's side. And this is my great aunt. Okay? All of them, there's a mixture from, down south, West Indies, indigenous people to this land. So it's a lot of history there. All right, and these are just some of them. But I chose to bring them because of their qualities and their characters that I remember from them while they walked on this physical plane. So I want them to assist me in that from what I remember of them as far as those dynamics and as far as that strength that they had. Anytime that you light an herb, anytime that you light an incense, or anything that's going to vaporize and change from the states of matter. We have the three states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. You want to make sure that you say an affirmation on that thing before you burn it, because what happens is you clarify it and you absolve it from anything that might have been on it prior. All right. When you speak your oath or asher, you speak your power of spoken word on it. You clarify it, you clear it, and now it is open for whatever the intent that you have. Actions are but by intentions. Okay? So everything that you do, there's an intention behind it. Okay? And again, all these things are just conduits. All these things are just tools that we use. All right? I'm not worshiping these things on this altar. I'm not worshiping my egun, but I'm honoring them, and I'm utilizing tools that create that metaphysical bridge between the physical world and the celestial world, or the spiritual world. So a lot of people get caught up, and they look at things like this, and they say, he's an idol worshiper, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about in general, so I have to say he, she. People say he's an idol worshiper, or she's she's worshiping stone or statues of wood. No, these things have a metaphysical meaning that underlines what other people or the common or the layman, doesn't understand. Because remember, we have the exoteric and we have the esoteric. The esoteric is that hidden information. The exoteric is that information that is, is pretty much open in the public, that you don't have to work hard to get. You don't have to pass any initiations. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to sacrifice. This is there for you. Okay? To gain information, it takes work. Information and knowledge, wisdom, understanding, all these different jewels, it doesn't just come. It takes work. These are things that you have to make sacrifices for. These are things that you have to struggle for. And what I mean by struggling, it's not anybody's birthright to struggle, because you are entitled to anything that you believe that you are deserving to have. But when I talk about struggle, there's a level of commitment there. Okay? There's a level of commitment. And I can use a minuscule or a minute example, such as what we spend our money on. I can choose to spend my money on, some clothing when I already have clothing, or I can take that money and utilize it and buy a book, or I can take it and utilize it to buy, some music, and music is very powerful. Music is very powerful. And it's funny because when I came into enlightenment, I found out all the things that I was being told that I was supposed to stay away from brought my liberation. All the things that I was taught to stay away from brought my liberation. And it was a conflict of worlds, because as a young man, and you sacrifice your entire life, I lost a lot of money. I lost a lot of opportunities, quote unquote. And I'll say quote unquote, because now, in retrospect and reflecting on those things, they weren't for me. And I'm so glad that I didn't partake in those things. But at the time, I was told that this right here, you're not supposed to do this. Playing jazz music, even though there's no words, I'm not supposed to do that. I'm only supposed to be playing a duff. And the duff is not even, integral, is not even a part of my culture. A djembe drum is, a kunga is, So I had to realize that I was living somebody else's reality. And when you wake up, you lose a lot of friends, you lose a lot of family, and you lose a lot of people who you call your comrade. But on this journey of existence we call life, you have to be able to kill your ego, and you have to be able to, on the onset or the drop of the dime, not be afraid of approaching the people or standing in front of the people and say, I changed my position. Because I found some information that was greater than the information that I had prior. This is a struggle between you and your ego. The ego is the front man for you. The ego is the one that you have created, like the, how can we say, the ancient Hebrews created golems. Golems, they would take some clay and they would spit in the clay. They would ball it up, say their affirmation, toss it, and it would actually become something animated. That's what the ego is for us. It is something that we've created and we nurture on a regular basis. Why? Because of the external world. The external world feeds our ego. Thus, we don't feel the need to eradicate it. We want it to continue on because it is our, for lack of better words, our avatar, or the thing that other people see. Now, there's a clear correlation between us when we're talking about the celestial dynamic and the physical dynamic. Okay? Even a studier of the Zodiac or astrology would know that there are 12 houses. And from 1 to 6 is the northern hemisphere. And 7 to 12 is the southern hemisphere. It's sort of something like the Nile River, how, they say that the Nile River is upside down, the way it flows. But the southern hemisphere will be on top, and the northern hemisphere is at the bottom. When we talk about the northern hemisphere, as far as in astrological terms and the houses, 1 through 6 are dealing with you, and 7 and 12 are dealing with the outside world and how people perceive you. Your zodiac is nothing to brag about. Your zodiac is nothing to brag about. In fact, it's a template and a blueprint of what you need to work on while you're on this physical plane. It gives you a printout of what you have to work on while you're on this physical plane. So when you do that natal chart and you find out, where your planets are located, it gives you a clear, concise summarization of the things that you need to do and handle in order to have a great life. A great life. It's a form of divination. Divination belongs to us. Divination belongs to us. It's nothing scary. It's nothing grotesque or hideous. This comes from our sciences. This is the stuff that we did. And this is the stuff that we've been told that we shouldn't do. So we shunned it. And now someone else is using that for their greater good. And now we have nothing to work with. Matter of fact, we're using things that are recycled and are basically a scrapple of what they've left. That's what we work with now. Now, we're such a great people, we can work with scraps. We've worked with scraps before. We've ate the remainder of the pork. We ate chitlins. We ate feet. We ate all those things, right? But we knew that praying over your food would change that physical food into a spiritual food, so it would not kill us. There's a great power in which you speak. As far as your tongue is concerned, you can speak greatness into existence. You can speak your depreciation into existence. Just based off your word. And we take it like it's very light. It's not light. It's not a light matter, because you are all. You are all. You are the all. So whatever the all speaks into existence, it is. So if you look at yourself on that level of being the microcosm of the macrocosm, you will really be conscious and conscientious about what you're saying when you're saying it. Because it's also about when you say certain things. So a lot of times we hit ourselves with a double whammy because we say something or we speak death into ourselves. And depending on, the lunar phase, that which we speak can happen expeditiously. It can happen expeditiously. And this is a big pardon me, this is a big thing that living down south, I had the opportunity to travel the world. I had the opportunity to live in Mecca. I've had the opportunity to live in Morocco. I've had the opportunity to live in Egypt. I've had the opportunity to travel to Mali, Burkina Faso, Ghana. Hot can make good water too. Real water. Real water. About to do a commercial. So I've had the opportunity to travel to these different places, and that was my education. Beyond all the bachelor degrees and master degrees, that was my education. Because I was able to find myself in these different environments of which I had to adapt to without any conveniences. Imagine having to go to a river to wash your clothing. Imagine that the only food that you eat is at dawn when you're waiting for the mollusks to come up upon the earth, grab them, deshell them, and throw them in a kettle or a cauldron, and you're eating snail gumbo. Imagine you go to your abode and you can't turn on a light because there's no electric. You can only have light when it's time for sunrise, and when it's time, when the sun sets, that's the end of light. So these actually annihilated my conveniences, and it did a great thing for me because now I appreciate things much more. And also for me, simplification is key. When I came back here is when I received culture shock because I saw people on this hamster wheel looking like zombies. Where I had just come from, the people were, they didn't even wear watches. You understand? They weren't boggled down by their occupation or their job. They did their job in their occupation, but it didn't come foremost before their family. There was a synthesis in the neighborhood or between your neighbors. Meaning that you just don't see your neighbors and say hi and how's the weather, I mean, you're really going to your neighbor's home and seeing if they have something to eat at night. So these are this is the etiquette, this is the mannerism that I was exposed to, and it did me a great deal of good because I was able to see how far I was away from that. So coming back here, you know, it was time to implement those things to change my life for the better. The title, it's pretty long. I mean, it's pretty long. But at the same time, the gist is very simple, but very hard. I won't say hard, but very challenging to implement. Very challenging to implement. There was a time where we weren't, we didn't use so much verbiage. There was a time where we didn't have to speak with so many words. There was a time where we didn't have to elaborate and use 4 or 5 different words for one word to express ourselves, and for the person who's responding in a conversation to be able to understand or understand what we're saying. We're far from those times. Now we're judged in a time where if you don't have a huge vocabulary, you're deemed to not be learned. If you don't know how to say something 6 different ways and know the etymology of it, you are deemed as a person who is not studied. So at this time, we're in a period where we're trying to translate information or trying to transfer information, but our words get in the way. Our words get in the way. Now, wait a minute. How are we going to use communication in order to give information or get information, but the very tool that we're using to communicate gets in the way? It's almost like an oxymoron. However, the utilization of the law of correspondence in acting or in activating our full potential celestially and terrestrially. All right, what the hell did he just say? What did he just say? Utilizing the law of correspondence. Is anybody here familiar with the Kabbalion? Anybody familiar with the Kabbalion? It's actually a book that was written by Walter William Atkinson, who used the moniker or the pen name of the 3 initiates. Okay? He used the moniker of the 3 initiates. So my first time being introduced to this book, I'm thinking like, this is like, wow, you know, the 3 initiates wrote this. Like, what were they initiated in? I was supposed to laugh. Like, seriously, like, I mean, 3 initiates, that sounds deep. You know, and anybody who wants to go or delve into esoteric, you know, sciences, it's like the 3 initiates is like, man, like, what are they dealing with? So I did the bio, or did some research on who actually wrote it, and it was William Walter Atkinson. Okay, he was a lawyer. You know, he was, you know, kind of like a socialite, but he had some information on the esoteric sciences. Okay, masonry. And he used the pen name, the 3 initiates. Anyway, in the 3 initiates, they introduce us to universal laws. And universal laws are what we can find across the board in any religious affiliation that you have, any traditional system that you have, any form of spirituality that you affirm through ritual and things like that. Universal law can be found in all of these different avenues or veins. So what universal laws do is they decipher and demystify the hoax. Demystify it, and it actually puts power back into the person who's practicing the universal law, and it lets you know to first go inward before you go outward. First go inward before you go outward. A lot of us fall into the mistake of going outward before we go inward. Okay? When you go outward before you go inward, what you do is you don't pay gratitude or reverence to your ori or your head, your God, your higher self, your intuition. So many different names for it. But going outward before we go inward, it basically depreciates that. So the secret is, or one of the secrets, because it's a whole lot of different secrets. I don't want to say the secret, and you'll be like, this is the secret. So one of the secrets is that as above, so is below, as is within, as is without, as is the past, as is the present, and the future. Correspondence. Correspondence are two things that are polar opposites, or have two different polarities, but they engage. They engage. You know how we have lightness, or light rather, and darkness? We have quote unquote good, and we have quote unquote bad. These are all polar opposites, but they correspond. Because in order to know my present and my future, I have to know my past. And in order to know my present and my future, I have to know my past. I don't know if I said that. All right, and in order to know myself inwardly or internally, I have to know myself externally and outwardly. And vice versa, for knowing myself outwardly and externally, this brings liberation in me knowing myself inwardly and internally. And as I know myself above, or I know myself celestially in the heavenly bodies, and I know who they are and I know what they are, I know myself here on this terrestrial plane. Okay? So this is correspondence. Macrocosm and microcosm. And activating our full potential. We have a potential that lies dormant. We have a potential that lies dormant. Meaning some of you don't even know the potential that you possess. Because you've never been challenged to activate it or utilize it. If you don't have any experiences, if you have never been engaged with things that are not your familiar or your known, you won't have options, and you in turn will not know how you will react when faced with these kinds of situations and incidents. So with that being said, in knowing your potential, you have to know that you have a potential that lies dormant, and it's been suppressed. It's been suppressed in a numerous amount of ways. It's suppressed in the media. It's suppressed in our traditional educational school systems. It's suppressed in our religions that we practice. It's suppressed in our engagement or in our stereotypes of other people who we don't understand and who we don't know. It's suppressed in all these different ways, our potential. So being programmed and being conditioned to feel a certain way, to act a certain way, to speak a certain way, to love a certain way, to engage a certain way, to view yourself a certain way, is a challenge in order to change. Especially if you're not given any tools that assist you in that liberation. We turn to Western medicine. There's no help there. They don't provide a cure. They only provide, they provide alleviation, the alleviation of symptoms. So a person is still sick and don't know it because their symptoms have been alleviated. And with the medication that they prescribe, it also brings upon other complications in which you need more medication. So we can't look to Western medicine for that key to liberation. Can't turn to the traditional educational school systems because it's a war against our children in that forum. You know, as far as the education of our children are concerned, it has numerous amount of variables that pretty much cater to the fact of why our children express themselves the way that they do in those four walls called a classroom. Classrooms are they're the prison cells of free thought. Okay. If you have a student in class and he's outspoken and he's gifted, and he raises his hand, or he knows the answer to everything that the teacher actually conveys to the class, he's deemed as being a troublemaker. He's deemed as being a problem student. Okay? If your student or if your child is in the class and he finishes his work before everyone in the classroom and he's not being challenged, and by not being challenged, he gets into other activities instead of sitting in a hard wooden desk for hours on end, he's deemed hyperactive. If he says anything about the teacher questioning him, he's operant defiant disorder. He has ODD. So they have all these acronyms on how they actually define our children, and we actually sign away our children's lives. Okay, so we can't look for the key to liberation in the traditional educational school system. Religion. Okay, you would think that after medication has failed us, you would think that after education has failed us, you would think that we would be able to turn to religion and open those doors to that holy place and be able to find some solace, be able to find some peace. Not the case. Especially when they're telling you that you're powerless. Especially when they're telling you that you have to put your faith in another man. Especially when they're telling you that the God or the gods are angry with you. Especially when they're pushing a certain code of morality that is foreign to you. We can't find our key to liberation there either. So we're actually running from all of these places. And at the same time we're running from all of these places, the media gives a stereotypical view of us that is seen around the world. So no matter where you turn to, whether you want to stay in America or whether you decide to leave and become an expatriate, the world that you run to still have an idea of who you are because of what they've seen or because of what they witnessed as far as propaganda is concerned. So with that being the case, you have to internalize this thing now. We have to go inwardly, because we know that everywhere we go externally and outwardly, it's not our salvation. It's inwardly. Celestially and terrestrially. When we talk about celestially, we're talking about the relationship between the planets and us on this physical plane. It goes back to that law of correspondence, and it also goes back to the macrocosm and the microcosm. Because there is a relationship between what is above and what is below. And there's it's an intricate space between them as far as even defining the law of polarity, because when does this become that and when does that become this? So we merge it. Because this is another one of the secrets. Everything that happens in the universe happens within you. Everything that happens in the universe happens within you, and everything that happens within you happens in the universe. I was doing some research and I found out that Saturn is depicted as Chronos. Is anybody familiar with Chronos? Chronos is depicted as the god of time. You know, you have those Chronos watches? Okay, as the god of time. Chronos was a titan. Chronos' parents were Gaia and Uranus. He received an oracle or prophecy that his progeny will one day overthrow him in his rulership. So he ate his children while they were being born. He ate all of them. Upon their conception, he ate them all. Also, in another narration, it says that Kronos, whose mother is Gaia, he conspired with her in order to harm or injure his father Uranus, because he had secretly locked away one of his children, which was another one of the Titans. She was displeased about that. What Kronos did was, he took, what is this thing called? It's a handle and it has a hook that's like a crescent.
The cane? Sickle.
It's a sickle,
yeah.
Sickle, okay? He took the sickle and he castrated his father. He took the sickle and he castrated his father. All right? Now, with that, we know that Saturn is equated to Kronos. All right? We know that Saturn is a very dark planet. We know that this figure of Kronos is a very dark character. And we know that this character of Kronos is ruled by power, ruled by jealousy, and his ego plays a large part in his existence. So now, when we go to our natal chart, when we have our natal charts done, if we haven't already, and we see that we have this planet of Saturn going into a particular house from the 6, from the 1 through 6, or from the 7 through 12, we know that that's an area that we need to watch out for. Because what can happen is inevitably we can be overwhelmed by this need for power and also envy and jealousy. So that's a determination. Well, this is actually now we're using a planet or planetary archetype to actually decipher our existence here on this physical plane. When we get into myth, when we get into fairy tales, when we get into lore, all these things have a truism or are based on things that have actually occurred, or the potential and the possibility of what can actually occur if we choose it to occur. When we get into anthropomorphism and we liken things that are inanimate or an animal to have human characteristics and qualities, and we put this in our myth and we put these in our fairy tales, it's an esoteric understanding of what those particular those animal archetypes, what they are and how they relate to us. So when we apply this, so we implement this when we're talking about our religion now. Okay? I'm talking about the Zodiac, and we're talking about the planets. Okay? And Christ is depicted as the sun. Okay? We know that there are two ways that we can spell sun. We can spell sun S-O-N, or we can also spell sun S-U-N. Okay? And around this sun, we have planets. One of the things that I found the most interesting in esoteric information is spoken through art. Esoteric information is spoken through art. So when we look at these pictures like the Last Supper, which actually indicate the seasons of the year, the months of the year, the planets and the sun, we see that there's a correlation between the two. The picture of the Last Supper, okay? You have the table. Back in those times, they didn't eat on tables, okay? They ate on the floor. And they also ate together, like they still do. if we travel to the east. All right. Also, when we look at the disciples in that picture of the Last Supper, we see that they're spread out, but they're in groups of 3. Okay? If you look at the bottom of the table, there are 4 legs. Okay? Those 4 legs, each of those legs, they actually correspond with the 3 disciples, indicating a month and the 3 seasons in that month. So we have Christ or the sun in the middle of these planets. So there's actually a picture of our solar system, when in fact we've been taught that it was a picture of the Last Supper or the image of Christ and his disciples. So we've been pretty big on the solar phases or the solar movement. The Celts believed in the lunar phases. All right, they believed that there were 13 months in a year, and they believed that there were 28 days in each month. Also, they did not go by the Zodiac archetypes as we go by, as far as the animals or figures that were, half human or half beast. They actually go by trees, or they go by flora. All right. Now, in talking about the moon, it's important that we are in tune with the waxing of the moon and also the waning of the moon. Today we're in waxing gibbous. All right, and actually the moon is in Gemini. So in waxing gibbous right now, meaning the moon is becoming fuller. It's becoming more full. So this is a time that you want to pray for abundance. You want to make affirmations. You want to draw that to yourself of that which you want to have. Okay? This is not a time to banish. It's not a time to lose things. It's a time to gain things, which is in the waning of the moon. Because in the waning of the moon, this is when you want to banish things and you want to rid things from your life. An unhealthy relationship, or just an unhealthy act, or something that is bringing rancor to your life. That's what you want to do during the waning of the moon. All right, so we're in the waxing gibbous right now. However, something that I found out is that when the moon is waning, we're in waxing gibbous right now. All right. So when the moon is waning, remember we talked about we're supposed to banish things. However, depending on how you ask for something, you can still gain something and alleviate something. So we would think to ourselves, like, when the moon is waxing, this is when we want to ask for success or wealth or that job and things like that. And when the moon is waning, we want to, rid ourselves of, this bad job, to get a better job, or a sickness, or, any kind of dis-ease. However, when the moon is waning, we can still acquire wealth because we can affirm not having or not being in poverty. So this is an activity that you can do even when the moon is waning, to rid yourself of poverty. Now remember, the moon is waning, so you're supposed to rid yourself of things. We're not incurring things right now because it's not waxing, but depending on your word and your spoken word, now you can still rid yourself of something and still gain something, because what is the opposite of being impoverished? Being wealthy. So now, while the moon is waning, I'm asking for, the banishment of poverty. So now it's a double hit now, because while the moon is waning, I'm asking for the banishing of poverty, and while the moon is waxing, now I'm asking for wealth. So now you benefit while the moon is waxing and waning. You benefit both times. And this is important when we get into how we say things or how we ask for things. When we ask deities for things, it's important that we're clever. I'll say it like that. We're clever. Okay? You have to be very tactful and very clever when we're talking about asking an entity or a deity for things. Okay? Because if we don't select our words strategically or giving it thought, we can be deprived of something that we're trying to gain, just because of the way we're asking for it. So, and I used an example prior. An example would be, should I've come to this lecture? You cast it before you come, all right? Or you do any form of divination that you know of. Right? Should I've come to this lecture? And you toss, or you use teacup reading or tea leaf reading or whatever your forte of divination is, and it comes out no. What's another way that you can ask for that? Is it possible for me to leave a little bit earlier to go before it actually starts? So now you know you have a certain time frame now that you were working in, but you received information that says no, but it was concise for that time frame. So now you go and you question again, but now you're using something that's a little bit more ambiguous as far as the time frame is concerned, or now asking if something is missing that would enable me to still go and still have the desired result that I want. Remember, all this is coming from you. All this is coming from you. So the power that you, the energy that you put forth when you're asking an external entity or a deity something is actually you have the answers within yourself. However, a lot of us don't really fully recognize that we have that power. All right? So we do things that bring about a physical manifestation instead of knowing. Like, it's a difference between thinking and being. It's a difference between thinking and being. Because if I'm thinking about, my answer coming a certain way, and if it doesn't, that might thwart me in my approach to actually having that thing. I might even lose interest, and I might not even, ask for that thing again, or I might move on to something else. But in actuality, it was for you. That thing was for you. But we have not because we ask not. We have not because we ask not. And if we don't ask the question a certain way, it's almost like not asking. So this is another principle of how we can use the celestial bodies and actually making our life more simplified, or making our life more happy on the physical plane. How's everybody feeling?
All right.
I feel like I've been talking for I don't know how long. Any questions right now before we move on? Any questions?
What is the action to? If it's the internal and external is yourself. Who's the action? Is it more or less having a discussion with yourself?
Now this is great, because for me to know that I don't feel well, I'm acknowledging that there are two entities. For me to acknowledge that I don't feel well, there's an aspect of me that knows that I don't feel well. There's a portion of me or a part of me that does not feel well. So there's two dynamics that are going on right now. So when we're talking about, our levels of consciousness and just being, it's a plethora of different states of consciousness per se. We've been taught that it's the id, the super id, and the ego. It spans that. Okay, it spans that, because we know that, and we know a proof of that is that we can actually multitask and do things at the same time, and there'll be totally different actions. So that conversation with ourselves, actually, I remember De La Soul had a song, Me, Myself, and I. So in understanding that we have these aspects of us. Even I have another example that just came up. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that there was a jinn that was with him, but he convinced it to become Muslim and take a shahada. Another aspect, because when we talk about the jinn, which are entities that come from a smokeless fire, we know that that's another state of matter as far as being vaporized. Remember, the jinn, they don't have a moral code of conduct. We can't say the jinn is good or the jinn is bad, because then we get into for lack of a better word, Shaitan's army, and they have a particular duty. He gives them, or he assigns them a duty, like he sends one to go out and break up a married couple, or he sends one to be with you when you're drinking, you're eating, and you forget to say Bismillah, and they take a portion of which you eat or you drink. So with that, we have a plethora of different people. Right now, I can say I want to be a superhero. I could be a superhero. You see what I'm saying? And I'm not saying it to be facetious. This is that when we were children, there were no limits on our imagination. We could be whoever we wanted to be, and we would affirm that. Like when you were a child and you said that you wanted to be something, no one could convince you that you weren't that thing, because our imagination was just that strong. We didn't have any limitations. We didn't have any boundaries. Our parents taught us boundaries. The school taught us boundaries and limitations. Overzealous religious people taught us boundaries, and limitations and confines of what you can do and what you can't do. Over a matter of time, what that does, it not only lays on your conscious, but your subconscious. So now you can't differentiate your conscious from your subconscious. And now you're a walking zombie. And this is why they got shows on the air right now like The Walking Dead or American Horror Story that actually go into these characters or these archetypes of what we become. American Horror Story is deep because, like, all right, they just finished the season Coven, right? Before then, they had a series. The season was called Asylum, all right. And the very first season that they were talking about the spirit, not of a person, but the spirit of an abode. Now, when we get into spirits of abodes and places, that's kind of deep for the television. For them to be actually giving you that kind of information, somebody's working on your side. So the first season they were talking about an abode on a home. So no matter who walked on the premise of their home, they would take on a different energy, and it would be something other than what they were. And it shows that people could not successfully be in this place and live for a very long time, because there would be some kind of heinous act or murder or crime done, in which there would be new people moving in which the spirit would feed off the people who were moving to the home. That was the first season. That's heavy. The second season, they went into Asylum. Went into how anybody remember Barberry in Philadelphia? Mm-hmm. It was an asylum or a ward. They used to take vagabonds off the street, mm-hmm. and do psychological testing on them, do lobotomies. People that didn't have any family or people that cared about them, or they didn't have any kind of identification or anything of the sort, they would run experiments on these people. They even do that in the prison system. They're doing that now. They even do it in the military. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about what we can, it's a plethora of different. There's no limit. There's no limit to what we can be. We choose to be less than superhuman, and we condense ourselves into who we are right now. All right, that was deep. Listen to what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. You can be a plethora of different entities within yourself, but with your conditioning, it will condense you into being this one-dimensional figure that you are right now, sitting in this chair. Mm-hmm. So your mind can wander about a bill. Your mind can wander about it's snowing tomorrow. Your mind can wander about how much money you got in your pocket, because the conditioning itself perpetuates itself. So now you're feeding it because you believe that you're less than a superhuman. So this is how important you are. Listen, it's so, listen. I get so happy because, I get happy because of having a physical body. Like just having a vehicle that can transfer me from one place to the next place, and I have that connection with I have that connection with the source, with the all, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or with Brahman, or with whoever, the creator, God, goddess. You dig what I'm saying? Because we can get into this verbiage, and we talk so much, we talk circles around our own head, and then you can't even pray because you're worrying about who you're sending a prayer to. Instead of sending a prayer to yourself. First and foremost, you have to edify yourself. You can't save anybody, you can't help anybody until you save yourself. If you're in the ocean with your child, you love your child, but you have one life preserver, you cannot give your child that life preserver. You have to utilize it for yourself, so then you have an opportunity or a chance to save them. Because if you give them the life preserver, they have a chance of drowning, and you definitely are going to drown. So when I think about like just having this vehicle and just the infinite possibilities in this incarnation, because remember, you incarnate until you get it right, and that's a figure of speech as well too, getting it right. But you incarnate until you get it right. You have some of the same life lessons over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you have these incarnations. We experience the same thing, but you're not you're not unlocking the code to say, okay, I don't want it to be Groundhog Day anymore. I want a new experience, or insperience, or I don't even want to come back. I want to learn somewhere else. So a lot of us would choose to stay here. A lot of us would choose to stay here, even when we know that there's something better. We'll choose to come back, because we're just attached. We're attached to this hell. We're attached to this suffering. And this is suffering when you have a human body. It's suffering. The loss. Everything that you experience as far as not allowing you to become your greater self.
I want to ask a question about it's been said that right now in this time that we're having something coming into our solar system. And is that about this new celestial, I guess, informational age that's coming to be? Is that the physical representation of that?
I don't know, but I know it's something coming to me physically. And the reason why I answered it like that is because, remember, when we get into this thing of correspondence, even if you don't have the answers celestially, you have the answers terrestrially. And when you figure out or you decipher or decode it on a terrestrial basis, it'll give you answers to the celestial horizons. So I know that in my relationship with the common man or my fellow human man, I know that if I treat him right, I know that if I treat her right, and I know that it goes beyond even wanting for them what I want for myself. But when I do that, celestially everything is intact. Celestially everything is intact. When I get a great education for my children, and I'm not talking about information that's irrelevant or that they can't utilize to strengthen or to build themselves. But when they really have an education that teaches them who they are, celestially everything is intact.
We're talking about a dialectic.
We're talking about a relationship. We're talking about a mirror right now. What the image up there? It is cast down here, and the image down here is casted up there. And the only way it doesn't reflect is if that image is slanted, because you can have a mirror, and depending on the position of the mirror, your face will look bigger. You dig me? If the image is flat, I'm going to have a more accurate image or reflection of that thing that's being casted. So now we're talking about things that are outside of your control, because remember, everybody in this room has a different reality. Everybody has a different reality. Your enemy has a different reality. Your enemy is working while you're sleeping. Your enemy is plotting, scheming, manipulating, strategizing while you're sleeping, while you're comfortable in this world that he's created. So while we are sleeping, they are awake. You can't tell me that they're not awake if they have taken our sciences and they sell it back to us. They sell it back to us. I go in Barnes and Nobles, and the whole New Age section is Kemet, is African traditional religion, is sorcery, magic, all those things. That was our science. We did that. We created those things. All right. So if we don't have the answers celestially, we get the answer. We get the answers here. Because even when we're working with divination now, remember, the physical transforms to the spiritual. So these things, these conduits are no longer physical when I activate them and I pray over them and I'm sending them off to who they're supposed to be designated to get to. So to the naked eye, it looks like it's a physical thing going on here. It's a spiritual thing. And there's a great part about tradition and ritual, because now the rituals that we have, they have no meaning. Marriage was a ritual. There's no meaning behind it. You can get married in 10 minutes. In East India, they get married in 3 days. It takes 3 days as far as the actual ceremony is concerned. There is no courting. There's no chivalry. There's no me talking to a woman's father anymore. There's no, mother speaking to the bride-to-be. These were rituals, because when you marry a person, you marry their family. So now we have rituals that have no basis behind them anymore. No basis. It's empty. So now we can understand why our youth can go and shoot each other in the head and not feel any remorse about it. Because we're talking about people or terrestrials that are, one, not connected with the celestial. Not connected with the celestial. Secondly, they're deprived of ritual with meaning. Not only ritual of meaning, but those people or those elders who are going to teach them those traditions and those rituals. The elders are not doing their job. The youth are not doing their job. Nobody's doing their job. Nobody's doing their job.
Can we be actually separated from our spiritual beings? We can actually sever that connection?
Well, remember, your spirit is just your persona. Your characteristics and those things. This room has a spirit right now. It has a spirit. It has a spirit of learning. It has a spirit of scholarship. It has a spirit of enlightenment. There's a peace. You hear these cars. Like if we stop right now, you can hear these cars. We didn't hear those cars before we even stopped to think about those cars outside or what's going on Broad and Erie. So there's a spirit over here. They say when one or two are gathered in his name, God is present. These are all esoteric universal codes. When we take them to be literal or on face value, this is when we lose the meaning or the basis behind of what was actually being told. Because remember, we're not going to get anything. We're not going to get anything. As far as initiation is concerned, they would take neophytes. As far as we're talking about like real masonry right now. We're not talking about this masonry, this stuff that they're giving to people now. We're talking about the true science. When it wasn't even called masonry. We're talking about neophytes actually being blindfolded and told to go walk into a room, and they walk on faith and don't even see the guillotine that's swinging before them, and actually have their head cut off in the name of scholarship and knowledge, of learning esoteric information. That's how serious it was. Because remember, this information, remember our people, we transfer a lot of information, oratory, word of mouth. You know, that whole writing thing, it doesn't mean anything. You saw what it happened, you saw what it did to the Native Americans, or the indigenous people. You understand? Those contracts and everything don't mean nothing. But we passed our information down verbally because we knew the power of the tongue and the Ofo Ashe. We knew how strong it was and how powerful it was, because this Ofo Ashe, it can build you or it can destroy you. Not only can you build and destroy somebody else, but you can build and destroy your own self. So any other questions before we get into the
The enemy shows us in a lot of ways what they intend for us. When you were talking about the cannibalism, the movies Dead Walking and Walking.
Right off the Barnary sub-stop, Philadelphia, PA. Shot so loud you would think it was a club spot. African Americans, although we all over the web, we the hood librarians. We ship to prisons too. We reach out and deliver to those that's bitten too, but it's more than a bookstore. You wonder we got it, mixtapes, DVDs, and culture products. Black and Nobel got our hands in a lot of projects. We welcome all to come build, the energy is positive. Every member of the team is awake and conscious. Come through and experience this place of knowledge. They say they'll put it in a book if they wanna hide it from us, but we got them books so you can buy it from us. Something to read while you on a train or riding the bus. Get your read on, food for thought, get your eat on. Black and Nobel, I buy my books at Black and Nobel.